when you get to the core of what's happening in this backdrop that feels super complex and interconnected and collective and overwhelming, peel back the layers and you see one person at the dials. Aye! We back. Another reflection on the daily Vedanta. Great person theory. This is often called great man theory, and we're going to adapt it to 2025. Great person theory. Have you ever heard of great man theory? Or you probably haven't heard of great person theory because I just coined that. But great man theory posits that history is shaped more by exceptional individuals than it is by collective backgrounds or social movements. Critics of this will often say that it can over-rotate towards individuals. You can't just point to George Washington or Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson for starting the United States. You need to point to a massive backdrop, maybe going back a couple hundred years of literacy, Enlightenment ideals, the printing press because of the ability for colonialists to print pamphlets. These are all true, but the over-rotation in the other direction, I think, is even more misguided. To say, you know what, there was Beethoven and Mozart, but really these were movements, and these are individuals, players within movements of larger cultural backgrounds of what was happening with music at that time. Or revolutions were taking place more often because of the ability to pamphlet around ideas in the 18th century. And it is an admitted generalization, oversimplification to try to speak for, and maybe it's just laughable to try to speak for an entire philosophy like Advaita Vedanta. If it were to take a stand on which side of the aisle it would cast its vote if it could only choose one. Great man theory or historical social movements as the predominant movers, shapers of society. Might be laughable. And yeah, I love to laugh. Laughing is, dude, live, love, laugh. It's what I got a tattoo on my right shoulder in Sanskrit. Live, love, laugh. So I love to laugh. So let's try to take a stand. This philosophy, in my view, this is James speaking. It's not the philosophy speaking, but in my view, it would put all of its chips into great person theory. To the world around us being shaped by exceptional individuals. Why is this dichotomy even important? Why is this relevant to us? Well, I think the predominant narrative that we're served is that, well, the world just kind of happens and we watch it and we can't impact it. We're a tiny little speck of dust in this massive blue marble in this massive far-flung universe. We can't have that much of an impact. And yet you see great people throughout history making tectonic shifts because of the cultivation of their character to such an incredible degree that they can move nations. Gandhi's a good example. One of the first peaceful revolutions for hundreds of millions of people. A peaceful revolution that brings liberation to an entire country, an entire subcontinent. India is so large, you might as well talk about it as a subcontinent. Would that have happened socially, culturally, without that? Who were Gandhi's influences? Emerson and Thoreau, oddly enough. American writers. American writers that studied the Bhagavad Gita daily. Gandhi traveled with the Gita everywhere he went, compiled by the great sage Vyasa. History, it's almost like there's these notes, specific notes of great people that ring out throughout the symphony. And it's a few notes here and there shift the entirety of the symphony. Shift the texture, the music of our world because of the notes that ring out from their actions. I think 100 years ago, 200 years ago, maybe we over-rotated towards mythology of great individuals, forgetting all of the collectivist action, social backdrops that made their achievements, their impact possible. But now I feel like this pendulum has swung so intensely to the other degree, where so many of us feel powerless. You can look at the headlines. And these complex things like financial markets, and feel, especially in the volatility right now with Donald Trump's trade war and tariffs and then backing them off. And you can say, well, what can I do about this? Financial markets are one of the most complex things in the universe. Financial markets might be even more complex. They might be even more complex than the human brain, because even the human brain has these chemical laws that it follows, these natural laws that it follows. And the financial markets are made up of human brains that we now know are laughably irrational at times. It's that old phrase, the only thing worse than an economist is an amateur economist. No one knows anything when it comes to financial markets. And from one direction, you could say, well, what could someone do in the midst of the complexity of something as wild, intricate, interconnected, variable-driven as a financial market, and yet the very scenario, the volatility of this complex thing called a financial market, is coming from one guy. One guy. Donald Trump the president deciding almost more unilaterally than any politician has ever done anything to just jack up crazy, wild, 3-digit tariffs on countries around the world. Like China at whatever it is, 147%. And yet when you get to the core of what's happening in this backdrop that feels super complex and interconnected and collective and overwhelming, peel back the layers and you see one person at the dials. Obviously, there are other people in the mix. But in terms of one person going against the grain in literally every way possible, politically, maybe not socially, because people wouldn't have voted for him if it wasn't socially aligned, but politically, so against the grain that no one thought he would have won one presidency, much less two. But no matter how you look at it, for better or worse, that's an example of a singular mind. Maybe surfing alignment with a backdrop of collective ideals, but still a singular individual putting their fingerprints on history, applying themselves and shaping the world near unilaterally. What this philosophy says, what Vedanta says, in a much more positive and apolitical way, is that each of us can make that kind of imprint on the world. Can't fix the world. Ramatirtha described that as trying to fix the world is like trying to straighten a dog's tail. No revolution sets the world to right. But you absolutely can serve your community, serve yourself, serve your country, serve perhaps all human beings with a full application of oneself. A singular individual nails the heart transplant, cures polio, splits the atom. A singular individual can shift the entire shape of a community. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is thinking we're this tiny little speck of dust in this massive universe. A life lived full of small good acts can make tectonic shifts in the community and the world at large. I've heard it said that each person interacts with about 1,000 people in the course of a year. 1,000 people. That's probably a conservative guess. And if 1,000 people interact with 1,000 people, that's 1,000,000 people just in a year. We also know in the last decade, as it's been studied, that you can catch moods like a cold. Positive mood, a negative mood. Imagine you're just spreading a positive mood to those 1,000 people. And there's a pandemic of smiles because you decide proactively, very deliberately to spread positivity. Those 1,000 people, spread it to another 1,000 people. In the course of a year, that's 1,000,000 people. Directly and indirectly impacted by those small acts. Imagine cultivating your intellect. To not follow the herd, but start to become aware of how capable you are in a field that you might be uniquely wired for. It's said in this philosophy that the greatest work we do for others is the work we do on ourselves. Because that cultivation of our intellect cascades into every action throughout the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, a lifetime. Stack good days on good days, good weeks on good weeks, and that turns into good decades on good decades. And I'm certainly not saying that we can fix the world, that even trying to fix the world, in that broad stroke sense, is a worthwhile endeavor. But with the cultivation of our intellect, awareness of what we are capable of, with an inclination much more towards great person theory, that exceptional individuals leaning into what they're wired for, especially in the positive service sense. We certainly know what tragedies madmen can put on the world, but leaning into the positive, the impact, if you take the long view, decades, centuries out, the impact that that individual can have. Inclination away from, well, everything's just a complex movement of multiple pieces and, well, one individual can't really have that much impact. Movement away from that and towards great person theory view of the world, that individuals absolutely can shape their communities, their countries, the world at large. That, which is what history has been shaped by, over and over and over again by the lighthouses throughout history that we still talk about thousands of years later. That reshaping comes from you, reframing and reshaping your view of the world towards a worldview of understanding. The world has only been shaped by great people, by wise, clear thinkers, and reshaping our internal view to recognize that not only are you capable of being one of those, but it's all of our inherent nature. It is our nature to be one of those. And according to this philosophy, we're not just capable. It is our inherent nature to be one of those people. Maybe not all at once. But like I said, stack good days on good days. truth on truth, as Shakespeare said. Be true to thyself, and as night follows day, thou canst be false to any man. Stacking good days on good days, reflections on reflections, truth on truth, decades on decades, and perhaps you'll see that that's true. That is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.